What is up, adventurers, and welcome to another ShawnSetGO video. Today we're going to be talking about a recent video made by Quazii talking about this is how to fix Mythic Plus. In their video, they go over a number of topics, basically leading into Season 2 and the major issues. We're going to react to it, jump into it real quick, but before I do, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who helped us get to the 1K sub mark. It's been a crazy journey getting this far, but over the past couple of months, you guys have definitely been super supportive and super helpful, and so I can't thank you enough. Apologize for the lack of content in the coming days. I haven't been feeling the best, but I'm gonna try to keep on at least doing something along the lines, but the stream may kind of die down a bit just because I haven't been feeling in the best. But let's jump into the video and talk about it a bit more. I'm gonna jump across a bit just because they have some points that I think, of course, are important. But I'm going to kind of focus on some of the topics that I think are the most important in there. I haven't watched this entirely, but I'm going to focus on the chapters here and kind of stick to that.
So the war within Season 1 LFG for Mythic Plus is pretty much really quiet, and it hasn't been so quiet in LFG Mythic Plus in a long while. And today in this video, I want to talk about...
I think it's kind of normal. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, you get closer to the end of the season, you have like really just the people trying to get some like Keystone Hero and trying to finish those off real quick. I myself, I mean, I'm gonna be honest, I just didn't have a desire to, and I haven't for some time. So I'm not gonna pretend like I wanted it or try to ruin someone else's key, trying to just rush to get to the mark there. It just kind of dropped off at a certain point. I think it just kind of, and then I'm okay with that. I don't think I need Keystone Hero for anything.
Why and how Blizzard can actually fix Mythic Plus for Season 2 and beyond for the war within, because let's face it, Mythic Plus and Season 1 just isn't enjoyable. I've made a very comprehensive list of all the things I think Blizzard should address, and this video is not meant to be a criticism of Blizzard. I actually think that since the dark days of Shadowlands, you have been listening to the community, and this is the reason why it's worth the trouble putting together a video like this, with clearly timestamp sections as well as notes on screen that you...
I understand he's trying to like, not necessarily backtrack, but he's trying to like, you know, just be like, hey, these things are just not congruent with what you're trying to achieve. But I think it is a criticism of Blizzard and their efforts, when so many things are designed as just roadblocks for the sake of being like let's make this harder, you know. I think like one of the biggest things is with M+, like M+ putting things like Caesar Borealis, and like it's just like there's just things that are like, why? You know, why put this of all things in the game?
You can follow. And so hopefully when the war within Season 2 rolls around, you can actually look at some of these issues that are not only brought up by me, but also brought up by my community and the broader M+ community in terms of what needs to change in Mythic Plus and why it feels bad right now. I know some of you are listening, especially those who have, you know, we have had a sidebar about this, but I hope this video will be way more helpful just based on the timestamp sections. So let's dive right in.
He goes over the Valor Stones, it looks like here, but I want to go over the Crest drop rate.
Let's use it. The Crest drop rate is absolutely terrible. I think you need to drop more Crest per key at a baseline level. As of 5th of December 2024, you need to do 98 Mythic Plus keystones if you have a fresh ult at +8 or higher to cap all your gilded crest. If you ask me to play 98 Mythic Plus keys before I can catch up in terms of gear, I might as well quit the season and go play in Season 2 instead. It's just too...
I think the unfortunate part about crafting and crest, or crests in general and their drop rate, is not necessarily how much drops. I understand there could be a limited amount of things. It seems that we've foregone the ability of having just different items in general, even though we have this system that we can upgrade items to tier set items, and then we have many different sources that can drop a lot of different items. We've foregone all of that for an upgrade system, which not only limits how many like upgrades you can possibly do within that, but also makes you, or forces you to go, well, I can't really upgrade this. I can't really afford to, because if I do it here, it's gonna waste it for when I actually get my best piece, or the most annoying part for me, which is Like you go from a champion, you're like, oh, awesome, I got a hero track piece. You go from a 68 out of 8 champion, and then you switch over to hero track item. You're like, all right, cool, this is an upgrade, right? And then you upgrade it, and you're like, oh, it's the same. So so it gets to a point where it's like not even worth it sometimes to upgrade from a champion to hero, and you're just kind of like, well, this did nothing. So I suppose that's all there is. So yeah, that to me is ridiculous. And then he actually, I think there's a good recommendation here.
The next thing is targeted slots and item upgrades. I think a lot of people enjoyed the Dragonflight Season 4 bullions and the old dinar system, where I have a guaranteed way to get a certain item, trinket, or a slot upgrade. I understand you don't want to give loot out. Totally understandable. Some people think that raiding should have additional perks and incentive. I can totally see that. That's fine. However, when your season is absolutely dead, like if I were to pull up LFG right now and I search for keys between a certain range, you will see that it's way lower participation rate than usual.
I think it could be something that, thinking about this idea, I think it's something that you can add over time, like early on, like the first month or so, you can definitely have it to where there's no modification because everyone needs a lot of gear. But I think over time, like the more vaults you do, but with each successive vault, let's change out one piece, let's change out one row, let's do a 2-row refresh, let's do a targeted item, like you're more likely to get this piece. I think that would be a good replacement for, say, back in Classic, when as a warrior you want to farm Savage Gladiator's Chain, like doing that farm, you at least have, even though it's a low drop rate, you still have you still have a targeted way of doing it. You just kind of, you do your farms, you wait till the proper boss drops, and then from there you just kind of you get it, you get it eventually. But like sometimes I've sat on I think my biggest thing right now, I mean, probably for a number of people, is trinkets. Any trinket I get, I'm like, please, just something, please. Something. It doesn't have to be bis, just something, please.
During the lull of a season, maybe you introduce bullions and dinars. This could also be unlocked when Hall of Fame is filled. So the season is kind of over already, people are kind of checking out. Would you rather lose players to play Path of Exile 2 or retain players in Mythic Plus? Blizzard,
I think something that people miss about these things, like I think we think about, we need events and we need these like new things and these new things. Those are retention characteristics. It's like, how about just retention characteristics of keeping people interested in doing what they're doing now? I think the idea is like the idea by Blizzard is like once you release something out into there, there's no purpose in like fixing it or tuning it well, because it's no longer going to retain people. It's like, no, if you fix it within the season, people will appreciate that, and people will appreciate you changing those things. So why not make something that goes, hey, we're losing Mythic Plus players. Let's not worry about like making an event to give people another source of gear. Let's just make it to where people who are leaving because they're not getting a piece of gear for 3 weeks, 4 weeks straight, let's make it to where they can get that piece that they've been wanting to get a little bit more effectively in some route or avenue.
You decide. The other way to think about targeted slots and item upgrades, we have vault tokens. Let us use our vault tokens for more than just sockets on our head, on our belt, and on our braces. Maybe you give us vault token currencies where I can use my currencies to re-roll my vaults. Maybe I do not know, making stuff up. X amount of vault tokens, I can refresh this entire roll from Mythic Plus at reset, or using a specific.
Even if you gave me something to like, this is probably never going to happen, but even if you gave me something that would allow me to change a stat or modify a stat, because if I get a low prio stat that I'm not really looking for, or whether or not something has a socket that that could have a socket. I'm not saying invent sockets in places that don't normally have them, but I'm just saying, like, even if it's just something giving me something like that to where it's like, oh, it's a little bit better than what it was. Not saying full on reforging, that's not what I want. It would be miserable, but even just having something to where even a loss can be a win would be nice.
Amount of tokens, I can target a myth track unlock on a specific slot. Maybe something to think about. Give people a reason to do weekly keys. I think that's needed. M Plus rewards needs improvement. We have talked about this. I know Ion Hazikostas made a statement about this. Season 2, you're looking at Mythic Plus rewards being changed. That's great. But the point is, and you probably already know this, between Portal unlocking at plus 10 and between that and the top 0.1% in Mythic Plus getting the title, we need more incentives to play Mythic Plus. Seasons.
Yeah, right now you're basically, it seems like if you're not Keystone Hero, like there's no reason to do Mythics just because you can go straight to rating from Delves. There's honestly, that's just my personal perspective. I know it's not everybody's, but like I only did Mythics when it was worth it to do them for the gear upgrades. But when the upgrades stopped coming, both in Mythics and in my vault, I was like, why do this? It's just hassle that I don't really feel like doing. I'd rather do rating. Rating is a lot more fun to me. I'd rather spend dedicated amount of time and have more chances of getting loot, as long as there's plenty of plate wearers in the group to do that. And I think it's a lot more fun. And it's not timed, you know. You can kind of take it easy and you get to talk to guildies, etc. That to me is a much more enjoyable experience. To me, there's nothing interesting me in Mythic because I'm not interested in doing Keystone Hero. Like I don't feel like doing it. The penalty.
Difficult. Now moving on to there being too much pain and punishment in Mythic Plus Season 1 for the War Within. Challenges, perils, penalty, I think needs to be revisited. The M Plus community fears making mistakes more than ever. Each wipe is 1.5 minutes off the timer for the key. If you include the 5 times 15 seconds of penalty plus the run back from the dungeon. In fact, 1.5 minutes is a bit too generous. There are certain dungeons, call it, let's say Grim Battle, where if you wipe on a certain pack, you're running back all the way from the start of the dungeon. That's too punishing. And because it's so punishing, people are very fearful of making mistakes more so than ever. Because it's so costly to make mistakes now, everyone is more motivated now, more than ever, to invite meta specs only. Because
I think this is something that the community has caused on themselves a bit, to where and it happens to any video I make that has to do with Mythic Plus and talking about the punishments. I personally have said, and I've preached multiple times, that there needs to be more checkpoints. There needs to be more ways for you to recover from things that are mistakes, because those things do happen. And you've made it to where people now actively advocate against people going, there should be less harsh punishments for high keys, to the point where now we're in a system where the majority of people suffer for that 1% of people who are elitists, who are just saying that, like, oh yeah, I know, like you shouldn't wipe, like wipes just shouldn't happen, and if you die unnecessarily, you know, it's not the game's fault, it's your fault. I think that's kind of like one of those like Dark Souls arguments where it's like, where if you argue, for example, in Dark Souls, like you go, well, the runbacks are brutal, like going through that entire runback and then suffering. Well, that's part of it. It's like, well, this is a game where we're trying to, like, we're actively timed in doing it. So can you please not make it so like insufferable to lose time? That's and graveyard updates after each boss. That's actually
Scale it back. Speaking about running back and punishment, why is graveyard spawn points not unlocked after each boss? It's really inconsistent. There's some dungeons where, you kill the boss, you unlock the graveyard. It should just be kill the boss, new graveyard unlocked. As simple as that. Runbacks just feels bad. The idea of hitting the release button as a group of 5 and running back, it doesn't make the experience any better. It's not as though we're going to reflect on our mistakes while running back and go like, that was a mistake and I've learned from that.
A lot of people hate me for saying this, but I think there should be timeouts, you know, like you know, maybe not to invite anybody in, because my idea was more of when you have a lever in those moments, that way you can have time to re-invite somebody, like pause it until you start combat again, you know, type of thing. But a lot of people are like, well, the bots are going to do it. I'm like, well, bots are doing it anyways. Like, what's to stop bots from doing it now? From just inviting people. So I think that what would be nice is just to have, you know, like pre-boss or right after a wipe, kind of give people the ability to, right before it, just kind of stop, discuss for a second, like a 30-second timeout, you know, just like right before the boss that you could just hit and just, all right, 30-second timeout. We're not going to invite anybody. We're not going to change anything. But we're just like, the moment you initiate combat with anything, it's over, you know, like it's like the timeout's done. But just to kind of give people a second, you know, kind of discuss game plan, you know, like let's do something different, you know, because deaths are so punishing. To just kind of give people that minutia, a tiny little bit to recover.
To finish your keys. Also, M+ is kind of too expensive. But think about it, right? M+ is kind of expensive. There's flask, there's food, there's enchant, there's weapon oils, there's runes, and at the end of it, you get 50 gold if you don't loot any item. That is...
I would say this extends to raiding as well, especially if you're doing any pug raids, because everyone is going to greed. Not so much in guild runs, but you know, when you have a lot more people pugging nowadays, you have so many times I've gone to pug raids, and I've actively lost like 1,000 gold easy, you know, just from wipes and repairs, and it's ridiculous. It's like how much is me trying to get gear costing me versus earning me anything. It's kind of silly. Kind of want them to add like more quests, you know, for gold, but I worry that would fluctuate the economy too much. The economies always seem kind of out of order in a way. So ooh, this is a good one.
Something like that. Well. Mobs recasting after AoE stops is a mistake. So the change that you made in the War Within is that an important cast is about to go off. If you stun or stop with crowd control, the mob simply recast the ability. In the past, in Dragonflight and before, you will put the mob's ability, the important ability, on cooldown. Let's say if I crowd control it. That was a way better system. The reason why it feels bad right now is that everyone knows there's an important cast coming, so everyone saves their interrupts. And in the event that someone doesn't track the interrupt tracker and uses a AoE crowd control, all the interrupts go on cooldown and the crowd control is used, guess what? It feels bad because the ability is going to be recasted and it's a wipe. Recognize that most of your M+...
It's even worse that when you're not even necessarily trying to... You're not even trying to necessarily just interrupt. You're trying to get the target moved so you can properly tank them in the right area. You're just trying to shift their positioning, and you go to like you do a CC and they immediately start casting again. You're just like... And they stay in that same place, and so then they pull something or just it just becomes this hassle. Like they're not in cleave range or not in AoE range. It's so irritating. So it's like it doesn't make any sense to make that be the case, except to make it more annoying and to slow things down artificially. That's the only way it feels. It feels awful. Ooh, tank stuff.
Think about that. The other thing is the tank tuning disaster. When you first announced tank nerfs, a lot of people made videos about why this is such a bad idea, including myself.
Okay, I've made a video on this already. I'll try to link it in the video, but it's basically this. There's a Wowhead article, and in this they say a few things. They say we're gonna smooth out damage. We're gonna make it more steady, less spiky. All right, and then basically you're gonna still have cooldowns for emergency self heal, like they're going to be available, but you're going to have less moments where you go from 100 to 0 and a lot more moments where it's just like you're going to hit 0, but less insta deaths, you know, like, you know, or mechanics that go, if you don't respond to this immediately, you will die to the next white hit crit, you know, type of thing. And it seems like the opposite of that happened. And what happened instead was we got a removal of a lot of our self-healing and self-sustain. And we had a number of mechanics that still do that. And if you don't pop the proper cooldowns, you will die. So it's like the opposite of what you said happened. So there's obviously to me, a disalignment with these two things. But I'm gonna let him finish, but
and there are some skeptics saying
that's basically what it is.
Get it right, but tank tuning has been a total disaster. And here's why. Let me quote you some of the language you used. You explicitly stated that you would want to smooth out the damage that tanks and parties will tick. And tanks will take more damage overall, but shouldn't die significantly more often versus Dragonflight. The percentage of damage they take after mitigation from steady damage sources like physical attacks would be your primary objectives. Totally get that. I understand the rationale. Like I said, I think the tank nerfs are well.
It makes sense on paper, but it's not being really acted out in reality, is what it seems. So we'll move on to the next one. Let's go to lack of healers.
Same problem with healers. Lack of healers in LFG. Tank healing feels awful. There's no agency as a healer. If your tank messes up one global cooldown, as a healer, you have zero counterplay. Your tank goes from 100 to 0.
Yep, this is what I talked about in the previous video with like liquefy. You know, you pop your defensives and it's totally fine, but if you don't, you just don't have any opportunities as a healer, but you are still going to get blamed by somebody who doesn't know what they're doing.
It's just nothing you can do. Also, every other pack having some form of party AoE damage. I don't understand.
Oh my god, the excessive amount of AoE. There's so many just like unavoidable AoE. Like I love what's the second boss in I'm not good with names. Narubar Palace, you know, the big AoE he casts, you know, it just you hop out. That's cool. I like that. I like that like little intermission and you hop out, come back in. That's cool to me. That's fine to me. But the ones where you just like you're gonna get hit, there's nothing you can do. Brutal.
Then what is the fixation with Blizzard's dungeon design such that you do not want Mythic Plus players to pull big? That is a very strange take. I think most
Exactly. This is exactly what I've been saying. Dungeons have been designed in a way that are purposefully not user friendly, and it's antithetical to what you're doing. And I understand having a challenge. I'm not saying this shouldn't be a challenge, but what I'm saying is like, why is it constantly where it's like this is actively going to add time to us, even if we're good? Like there's no way to avoid this extra time that we're experiencing here, just because this takes a lot of time here. So if you're not as good as a group, having that extra amount is worse. It's like taxes. Like 10% of 100 is a lot. It's 10, but 10% of 10,000 is much less when you think about like total amount here. So you got to think about, to me, like how much this is going to affect people wanting to do this overall. Like just people are not going to want to do it as much. So poor dungeon design
this time around. Then there's poor dungeon design. I don't understand who is picking the dungeons at Blizzard. When Siege of Borealis was announced for the War Within Season 1, everyone started saying that this is a bad choice. Why is Siege of Borealis back? It was one of the most hated BFA dungeons. A lot of unfair mechanics.
I'm looking at it now. Theater of Pain versus Hall of Atonement. Oh my gosh. I haven't even really looked at the new dungeons. Man, Theater for Pain being back.
Hooks, the chains, blah, blah, yada, yada. You get it. Why is it that when you hear feedback from people that this is a bad dungeon, you do nothing to reverse that?
They don't listen to feedback on this. What they're doing, what they're actively doing, it feels like, is they go, which dungeon has the worst times? We're going to make that the dungeon of this season. I think you can do that. I think you can do that if you make active changes to make it different. You know, to change it from what it was. If you go, hey, this was the worst dungeon, but we're going to make this the best dungeon. But I don't think they're doing that. I don't think they're going to do that.
I do not understand why. This fixation of bringing back unpopular dungeons versus popular dungeons is weird. If you pull up Shadowlands completion of keys, I can guarantee you more people did Halls of Atonement versus Theater of Pain. But why is Theater of Pain being brought back instead of the more popular Halls of Atonement in Season 2? Surely you have the data. Somewhere in the depths of the Blizzard office, you have the data, but you're making very puzzling decisions. On top of that, why is Workshop coming back for the third time in WoW's history? We already had Workshop coming back as a returning dungeon previously. It's now coming back for the third time. I don't get it. There are more popular dungeons out there. You probably need to spend a bit more time thinking about what dungeons people like based on it.
I think this is a issue of bringing back what people are used to and thinking it's what people want. Just because these things had a lot of like they like people are used to the struggle or used to it doesn't mean they want to do it again. I think it's lazy. I think it's just lazy releases and lazy retention mechanics. Maybe because like they think like a majority of people want to, because I don't know what could be skewing their data, but it feels like the data is skewed.
We do Mythic Plus. But beyond that, there's also some food for thought. These are not suggestions, this is not direct feedback, but it's more related to something you should think about. Class identity is important, we get it, and that's why you want class buff to be specific to class identity, but make it more flexible to invite any comp in Mythic Plus. Bring back the ability for buff scrolls. For example, I don't have a priest, I can bring a stamina buff via a scroll. Yes, it's not as strong as a priest buff, but maybe make it, I don't know, 75% of a priest buff. So that way,
people would argue then all people are gonna do is they're gonna get their priest and that, like you get both, you know, in those cases. Like it'll make it worse, not better, I suppose. I feel like people would argue against that for themselves. But I do understand the concept. I do think that often certain comps are just straight up preferred. And there's a lot of cases where if you're not an optimal class or spec, that you won't be invited. I don't know the exact way to fix that, but I think what I've recommended time and time again is that dungeon design needs to complement the best of classes and the worst of classes more. I think you need that's like your balancer for whenever the specs and like your tier lists are released. You know, you get your tier list and you're like, all right, we see who's at the bottom, we're going to give those people a little bit of a benefit there to kind of offset the cases. Maybe it's just in that specific dungeon, but so they're not underperforming, so they still get invited in those cases. And then I'm sure the argument would come towards me, so I'm not unaware of this. I'm sure it'd be like, well, so what, we're the best class, so we don't get anything. I'm like, well, you don't get nothing, you just don't get as much. but I'm not the balancer. I'm not the person to argue this. So I think solo queue, there's pluses and minuses, fragments community, but shorter queue time, maybe separate ratings for solo queue versus pre-made. Yeah, I mean, I would say the issue of doing it in pugs is like when you do it with like pre-made groups, it's a lot easier to get rating, but I don't think hindering them is the way to do it. I think if you're doing it solo queue, for sure, I think it's I guess you should get, I feel like you should get more for doing solo queue versus pre-made, but I don't know. I feel like that would just hurt. It would harm the people who actually take the time to make their own pre-made group. So that to me doesn't really seem like the way to do it. But this video's already gone too long. A lot of great suggestions by Quazii and a lot of really good recommendations that could, I think, hopefully make season 2 much better. But which of these will be implemented? It doesn't really seem like these are active changes that I've seen in any sort of the updates. Maybe I'm wrong. But ultimately, I think that if we have a season 2 similar to season 1, we're going to see the same charts. I'm sure you've seen them on the r/competitive WoW threads where it shows Mythic WoW participation. If you haven't seen them, let me give you like a quick paint drawing of what they've looked like. So they've looked like this for the most part. You know, you take the initial performance. So we'll do these in red. So initial performance, and it'll kind of dip and then kind of come back, and then they'll drop, come back a bit. And this is just usually like maybe affixes, but also as time goes on, you're going to see over the weeks, it just kind of dips, comes back up, but it's never where it was previously. I think what we're going to see if this keeps on happening is we're going to see it's going to start here. It's probably going to start higher, in my opinion, because there's usually that initial height, but then it's going to go down, and then it's going to go down. These dips are going to be a lot lower, and how much it goes up is going to go, it's going to go less and less. And so that's my fear if a lot of these same habits continue. So I do think that stuff needs to change. And I think that if they continue in the path of improvements, I think they will. It's just a matter of, you know, are they willing to listen to that degree or make those changes in the season? It feels like as of late that once things are implemented, they're there forever, and that is what it is. So hopefully, fingers crossed for these changes. Hopefully Blizzard gets it together for this season 2. I hope your season 2 goes well. And with that, that's all I got for today, but I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.